Namaste and welcome to Satsang this evening or wherever you are, whatever time it is. And I wanted to talk about something that helped me begin to understand and break down this final duality, this final set of opposites of form and formless. And this is a concept that really is from Buddhism, and it's called interbeing. And when I first began to understand it, it really helped me to kind of begin to see that nothing really is separate to anything else, that I'm not, in fact, a separate being, and that the forms that we think we're seeing are not really at all what we think they are. So if you can if you can listen along and kind of follow along as much as you can, and these are going to be different ways of thinking about things than we're used to as human beings. As human beings, we're very used to believing more in the label, what we call something, than anything else, and actually investigating what it actually is. So whatever name we give to an object, we kind of come to believe in the name absolutely, that this is what this thing is. That this is a car, this is a tree, this is a house, this is a human body, this is a rock. And we very rarely question that. And yes, these names, these labels have a functionality to them. You know, we can use those names to kind of reference them. But I'd like to dive deeper tonight into this concept of interbeing and just begin to break down the way that we see the world. And it's enough to break down our assumptions about the world, about ourselves. And that gives space for reality to kind of come to the forefront, to be more obvious what it actually is. So one of the reasons that we suffer as human beings is the belief that we are separate to everything else, that we are a separate being, cut off and different to everything else and everyone else. And this is what fuels our mind stream of thoughts. It goes on and on and on, thinking about what it thinks is there in the world. It thinks that the world, our mind, is comprised of a whole infinite host of objects, of which we are one of those. We are one of those objects, a separate being. And is it really like that? And can we really begin to break down that and begin to understand? So when we take any object at all, and we're going to do this in a minute in a practical way so that we can begin to see, we can really look at that object and come to see that it's not at all what we might have thought it was. So let's take the example of a piece of clothing that you're wearing. So whatever you're wearing right now, let's just take the example, this t-shirt that I'm wearing. We can take an example, or anything that's in the room that you're sitting in, any object at all. And we could give it a name. So this, I've already called it t-shirt, but is that really what it is? What happens when we look closer at that label? Does it still stand up? Is there really such a thing as this particular item of clothing? And of course, to really kind of get into this, you're going to have to put aside a little bit your mind saying, well, of course there is, because the rest of the world would agree with you. So whichever item of clothing you want to look at in this exercise, is it really what you think it is? And we could say, well, that item of clothing couldn't exist without the fabric that it's made out of. So this t-shirt couldn't exist without the cotton that went into it. So is it really just a t-shirt, or could we say it's cotton? And then we had to include the other things that went into this. So we could say the dye and the stitching and all of that. And then we also have to include the person who made the t-shirt. We also have to include the field that the cotton was grown in, the water that was given to the cotton so it grows, the sunlight that went into that growing, the people that farmed that, the food that they ate that sustained them. Without any one of these things, without any one of these factors, the soil in the field, the machines that harvested it, the trucks that brought the cotton and made it into a t-shirt, then brought it to the store, the car that I used to bring it home. And you can do this with anything at all that you have. We're just choosing a very simple thing like an item of clothing just to illustrate this point. Without any one of these things, this t-shirt could not exist. And it's a really radical way to think about it then. Where actually is this t-shirt? What actually is it? Is it just something here, or is it a whole host of things? Because that cotton couldn't have grown without the sunlight, without the clouds in the sky, without every single thing involved, without the earth that it grew in and on. And, there are so many other examples that we could go through. If you really begin to think about this, the people that farmed the cotton, they couldn't exist without their own parents, and they couldn't exist without their parents, and so on and so on. And if you really look closely like this at any particular object, you find that it's not just existing on its own, that it doesn't really just exist in that way that we think it does. That is actually a label that we've put on a whole host of other things. So what is the t-shirt actually made of? Could we just say it's cotton, or is that really not true? Is it not also made of rain, sunlight, soil, people's efforts, the food that those people ate, their families, the houses they lived in? All of this is a broader way of looking at what something actually is. This is a really strange way of thinking about something, but it is nonetheless true. And as we begin to look closely at anything at all, we'll begin to see that it doesn't exist only in the one place like we think. It's actually not at all the label that we think it is. So we can do this also with our body. And if we ask what our body really is, we probably get some answers quite easily, that it is composed of organs and cells, tissues, blood, bone, skin, hair, all of those components. All of these are put together and put under one label called body. But if we look even closer, could that body exist without all of the water that's been fed to it the whole time? Could it exist without the parents that genetically came together? Could they exist without their parents? Could that whole thing exist, the whole body, without the food that the body has eaten our entire life? And when does it stop being food? And then suddenly, if I eat it, it's no longer this label food. It's now called my body. Even the air that I'm breathing right now, I take a deep breath in. When does it stop being air? And when does it start being oxygen going through my bloodstream? We so interchange these labels without thinking, yet we believe in the absoluteness of this. And the body, couldn't exist without the food. If we think for a moment about all the people that have prepared the food, cultivated the food that we've eaten our entire life, those people would also not exist without the food that they've eaten and their own parents. So this one word, body, human body, becomes such a bigger thing than perhaps we've realized? Can I really say what my body is, where it is, if it's really all these, it's into being with all of these other things? We're just moving away from the absoluteness of these labels. I have bought myself a new winter coat, and this winter coat, you know, we'd look at it and just call it a coat, but it's actually amazingly made of recycled plastic bottles inside, which I think is just amazing how they do that. But again, is it just a coat or is it plastic? And those plastic bottles that have been recycled wouldn't exist without the water that was inside them and the person that drank the water in that bottle. And the water wouldn't exist without the clouds in the sky that went to fill, and the planet and the grass and everything. So even something as simple as a coat is suddenly so much more than we might have thought. If we take something as simple as a sheet of paper, this is the classic example that's talked about in the scriptures. We could say, well, this sheet of paper originally came from a tree. So it's not really paper, it's a tree. But then the tree would not exist without the nutrients from the soil and the soil itself from which it grew, the sunlight which fed that tree that and allowed it to grow, any insects that pollinated the flowers on that tree. When you really begin to look at something like this, you'll find that everything is composed of everything. That everything is literally made of everything, that there isn't anything that can exist independently by itself. And as we begin to really break down the way we think and change the way we think, whenever we look at any object, we begin to see the whole universe. You might call it a sheet of paper, but it's something so much more than that. It's something so much deeper than that. And any label, any form, any name that we could put upon anything at all, and you can try this, and I do suggest you try this and spend some time with this. Any label that we put on anything at all begins to dissolve as we begin to think like this. Even just on a level of manifestation, all form is made up of everything. The place where all of these labels become synonyms, and they're just tools of convenience then. Everything is into being, meaning nothing can exist on its own independently. There's nothing that could arise, no manifestation, a human body, or anything at all, a galaxy, a speck of dust, a giant black hole, all of it is absolutely interconnected. There is nothing that can exist independently. And this just begins to allow us to break down these ideas that I am a separate being living in a separate body, separate to everything and everyone else. If we even take something as simple as a thought, can we apply it to a thought? Well, the next time you have a thought that runs through your brain, is it really a thought? Could it exist without the life force energy that's flowing through the body, the electrochemical impulse that flows through the brain? Could it also exist without the brain, the grey matter there, this thought? Isn't it dependent on that too? Which is dependent on the body. Without the heart pumping, the brain isn't going to be able to have a thought. So what we're calling a thought begins to change. Same with an emotion. What is an emotion? Is it something that happens inside our body? Is it just a feeling? Or does it start from a set of electrochemical impulses? Can we feel that emotion in the body without the body? And as we were just looking at, the body is interbeing with the food, with the water, with the air, exchanging oxygen, carbon dioxide constantly. So even a thought we can apply this to, even mind. Can mind exist without a body? Is there such a thing as mind? Or is it really just electrochemical impulses in the brain, which is really life force energy? So this might be a really different way of thinking about everything. This might be quite a scary thing for our mind to comprehend, that because it likes to have these labels. I know what that thing is. I know what that thing is. I know what that thing is. But if you look even just a little bit closer, you begin to see this whole web of labels begins to break down. You begin to see there really is only one substance that everything is made out of. And that what these labels are just names for the shapes it's taken, not the actual thing. There is no such thing as a thought. It cannot exist independently. No such thing as a human body cannot exist independently. If something cannot exist without depending on something else, then it does not exist on its own and never could. And so now we can go to the most important part of this, which is the relationship between our real self and the form, our unmanifest formlessness. Is everything that arises, every form, including our body, our thoughts, our emotions, our separate sense of self, our ego that we're also, our mind that we're trying so hard to get rid of. What really is that? Where really is it? If I think I'm a separate person and I talk to you and I have some thoughts about you, is that a part of me or is that a part of you? And if you have some thoughts about me, is that mine or is that yours? If you're thinking about me and remembering a satsang we did a while ago, do I exist here or in your memories? If you visualize something that you would like to have happen, including a whole bunch of people, where do those people exist? Do they exist outside of you or in your head at that particular moment, or all of the above? So if your mind right now is going, I don't get this at all, it's okay. All I'm trying to do is just loosen up the absolute belief in concepts. Because if I believe that this is a human body that's separate and independently existing to everything else, then I'm going to fear the end of this body. I'm going to believe it started. It started when this body was born and it ends when it dies. But is even that true? Wasn't it assembled together for 9 months before the birth? And won't there be some disassembly after the death? Does it still exist then or not? When it goes back to its elemental nature and is recycled into something else, doesn't it still exist as something else? And even before conception date, didn't it exist in the body of my parents, a sperm and an egg? This is a really weird way, isn't it, to think about ourselves? But hopefully we're beginning to break down this absolute belief in the labels that we have. This is a body and I'm living in it, and at some point it's going to end and I'll have to get out of it or I'll cease to exist or something like that. Just to think like this begins to allow some space to really come to see what reality is. And there is nothing at all, no shape, no form, no manifestation that can exist independently from the formless awareness in which it arises, the formlessness, our real self. If the space wasn't here that this house is built in, would the house be able to be built? If the room here didn't have any space in it, would there be furniture in it? If all of this cannot exist without the space that it appears in, does it really exist independently of the space? They must be one and the same. Can you have a thought without the awareness of it? Can you hear a sound without the listening to it? And if you can't, then that sound and that thought must interbe with the awareness, the listening. Nothing, no thing can exist independently from the formless nature. Nothing at all actually exists outside of, separate to the formless reality. All of this is shapes that formless reality is taking, and then we've stamped a label on that. That's a thought, that's a planet, that's a body, that's a dog, that's food. And if we really begin to look at that, we see it's really not so. Anything that cannot exist on its own, that depends upon something else, doesn't really have any existence of its own. So any form that seems to arise out of the formless cannot exist independently of the formless substrate from which it came. And as we begin to see this, and we must get really intensely curious about this, intensely curious. What is everything actually made of then? As we begin to really look, we begin to see that when I call something a label, I could really substitute any name. When I look at what I'm calling a human body, it's also the rain that fed the crops that was made into food that my body ate. It's the clouds, it's the soil, it's the grass, all of it. And it's also the space that it's sitting right in, the place, the location inside where it is. So when we're talking like this, you might notice that something doesn't really want to go here. Something inside doesn't really want to break this kind of down. And that is because, because ego resists, right? Ego resists everything in that way. It doesn't like to have its labels broken down. But what's the benefit of recognizing this, what I'm saying? What is the benefit? Well, a clear seeing, clearer each time you look like this. Don't expect a big epiphany right now, but today, from what we've said right now, it will be clearer than it was before. That nothing really exists independent of the self. And then next time you look, it will be even clearer, and then even clearer the time after. And little by little, every time I looked like this, I began to see that everything I thought was here, including my separate sense of self, which is really just a bunch of thoughts, memories, desires, experiences. None of those could exist without the head that they're being remembered in and thought about in. And the head couldn't exist without the food and the rain and the water and the grass and the soil, all of that. So even our separate sense of self is not really what we think it is. It's not a real actual thing. It's empty. It's completely made of emptiness. Everything from the smallest particle, subatomic particle, to the entire universe as a whole is completely empty of form. The one thing that everything is made of is completely insubstantial. Without this insubstantiality, none of this could have arisen. Has it really arisen then? Is it really what we think it is? And can we begin to move away from the labels, use them as a convenience, a functionality, but not really believing that there is such a thing as a car or a planet or an ego or a thought? And the benefit of this is that your experience becomes utterly quiet, peaceful, free of pain and suffering, free of fear, free of any potential even to suffer, because you come to know that everything is essentially empty. And if that feels a scary thing to recognize, that the world that I thought was there is essentially empty of form, that's a common and absolutely normal response. It was for me too. But as we begin to look at this, that fear will go. You're only coming to see how everything has always been. Not really learning anything new in satsang. You're just coming to remember, to put your mind back together in recognition of the truth that's always been true. How would your life change when you don't really believe that this is a body anymore? When you don't really believe in the absoluteness of labels like that? How would your body heal and recover from things faster if you didn't believe in the absoluteness of the label? How would your relationships change when you realize that what you're looking at is yourself? How would your joy increase when you really get this? And most of all, an unshakable, unbreakable, utter conviction that there is absolutely nothing out there to fear, and that there is absolutely nothing in here to fear either. It becomes utterly quiet then, utterly quiet. So if this is a new way of looking at things for you, then I just suggest spending some time pondering. Just pick some objects in your day-to-day life and just ask yourself, what really is this? And what went into the making of this? And could it exist without those things? And could it exist without the formlessness? Can you make a shape without the shapelessness? Can you make a sound without the silence? Are they really two then? Or could they be the same one appearing two different ways? When I first heard this kind of teaching, I ran a mile because it scared me. It's unfamiliar and it was very unwelcome. So it's totally normal if you kind of have that response inside, because I'm really trying to take apart your world, aren't I? I'm really trying to deconstruct it. But I'm only deconstructing the illusion, the thought constructed world, the labels. Okay, so I will answer some questions, try to get through 1 or 2 questions that have been emailed in, and we'll open it up for questions. So we'll take up to 4 questions online too. So this first question says, hi Helen, how to deal with a lifelong theme of abandonment and the deep hurt beneath it. I'm trying to sit with the feeling and let it be there, but I also want to maintain the sense of a me without it. This seems to be a core issue, and appreciate any suggestions you might have. Best regards and happy holidays. So how to deal with a lifelong theme of abandonment, the deep hurt beneath it. Trying to sit with a feeling and let it be there, but also maintain the sense, basically not to identify with it. How do I do that? Well, you can allow your body to feel that feeling. You can let the energy waves of that emotion pass through the body. But then you can also ask what it's actually about. What does that abandonment suggest to you? What does it suggest when you feel that, or you have a memory of that, or it happens to you? What is it suggesting? Is it suggesting that you are not safe? Or is it suggesting that you're not lovable? Or what is it suggesting to you, that you don't deserve to feel safe or happy? Or what is the idea that's suggested to you when that plays? So feeling the emotion, feeling the energy of it in the body, doing your best to just allow that, however much you can in that moment, and then questioning what's the story behind it. So abandonment probably comes with some sense that you're not safe, or that you can't rely on people, or something like that, or it's not safe to open up. And then you can take that into contemplation. Is that true, actually? Is that really true for me now? Because this idea is long held inside us, isn't it? That we're not safe, that we can't really let down our barriers in that. So you're doing the right thing. You're trying to allow the feeling, but you also don't want to identify with it, which is just believing that story. So questioning that story instead will allow this to diffuse and also not to come back again. So we all have these stories that I'm not safe, I can't get what I want, I don't deserve love, peace, happiness, awakening, whatever goes after I don't deserve is different for each one of us, isn't it? But it's still the same basic story. I'm not good enough yet, or something like that. So I hope that helps. I'll just read one more before I come to you, Sarah. It says, some non-dual teachers talk about a perceptual shift in which one no longer perceives oneself as a separate body and a world outside, but rather the world is seen as inside oneself, as it were. Is that your experience? I have never had the experience of the world being inside me, except maybe once on drugs. Any pointers to how this may be achieved, or even if this perceptual shift is important? Well, actually, this is really what we've been talking about, what I've been talking about before I began reading these questions. So you probably sent this in a while ago. So absolutely, it's important. It's the most important thing to recognize, that there is not actually a world outside of me, separate to me, because that's the main driving force behind fear and behind all of the behavior that we would like to see different from human beings. All the ways that human beings treat each other that we would like them not to is driven by this root idea that I'm separate being to everything else, that the world is outside of me. And yes, so you said, is that your experience? Well, it's not an experience because it's continuous. But I know what you mean. It's been seen. I've really looked at what I've been saying tonight. Looked and looked and looked again until I'm convinced that there is no boundary to my being, and that any word in any language, if we took a dictionary and looked at any of those words in that language, that is another name for me. Any word at all, that would be a synonym for my name, or for the formlessness, same thing. So yeah, it's very important. And in terms of how to recognize it, just like I've been saying tonight, challenge the ideas that no other human being really wants to challenge. This very popular myth, I know where I am, I'm here, and everyone else is outside of me, separate to me. What if that is not true, fundamentally? What is reality then? Just to be willing to challenge these assumptions. And there is no greater experience, state, condition that a human being can experience than this. It is very important. It is the most important thing. And it's not far away from you. It's just, it's as far away as we are willing to challenge these ideas. So I hope that helps. Have a try with what we've done tonight and see where it leads you. Pick an object and ask what it really is and go into that. Okay, so Sarah, when you're ready.
Sorry.
Lovely.
Hi, Helen.
Hi.
Yeah, your teachings tonight, were just, I'm so willing to see what you're saying. But the mind wants to make it complicated. But what I really want to speak of is I had an experience this week. I do breathing with a group. And it's just, there are no techniques, it's just breathing, just sitting together as one, breathing. And I had this clear seeing that I was one with the breath, and that the breath was breathing every single human being in this world. It was like, oh my God, my brother in Barbados, he's breathing the same breath as I am. My sister in Spain, same thing. It was like, I was just like, oh my God. If there's no beginning or end to breath. So sorry, I don't always explain myself well, but if we're all breathing the same breath, then something's not adding up. We have to be all one, just like you said. We have to be all made of the same thing. But then I could see houses in between and different countries, and like, how does this work? And all I could do was surrender it, because I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah. I think you explained it really well, really well. And
we can't be a body if we're all breathing the same air.
When does it stop being air, and when does it become my body? Where is the cutoff point? Is it when it's in your nose or down in your lungs or being assimilated into the bloodstream? Can you see there isn't really this, okay, 2 seconds ago it was air and now it's my body, and I'm using the oxygen to produce energy, and I'm using that energy to repair systems in the body and all of that. But is there really that dividing line? No. And just this willingness to see allows this kind of seeing to come. And it usually comes at first when we're kind of chilled out, when we're relaxed. So when you're just breathing and just chilling out, then it's something just kind of bursts through, doesn't it? And it's so radically different to what we thought was true that it's very shocking at first. Even though it's what we've wanted to see, it does take a moment to kind of go, wow, that's obvious, but also very new. Obvious when I see it, but also weird. Not at all what I thought or have believed.
Yeah. Yes, and you can't, I can't unsee it,
No.
but yet I don't know what to do with it. Does
Just
that make sense?
to woo it, to serenade it, to go, that was really nice and I'd like to see that again. And I'm just going to relax and wait for it to show up again best I can. I'm not going to chase it down the road. Because last time when it happened when I was just open and just, not trying to get anything. You weren't trying to have that experience where it just happened.
Yeah.
And each time you have a seeing like this, it leaves you more open, more relaxed, less fearful, all of that. So it's easier then to have the next one. Less inclined after each one to try to get anything or anywhere. Because it's kind of absolute when you see it, isn't it? More, this is how it's seen. Yeah.
It was so profound. It was like, oh my God.
And all the animals too. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen the river breathing.
Yeah.
But I just discarded it as an experience.
Well, the truth it breaks through as an experience, doesn't it? At first, it has to come to an end because the normal way of thinking cuts back in. Some thought might come back in eventually when you're having that seeing. Mind might start talking again, saying, oh, this is too big to, this is too weird or something. And it'll say something about what you're seeing. But after you've seen it a couple of times, it just becomes, oh, that's just, if you ask me what day it is, and I said it's Thursday, which it is here, you go, right, yeah, that's how it is. You wouldn't be like, whoa, it's Thursday. That's so weird, So you're seeing this over and over again. It just becomes, well, yeah, that's how it is. And it becomes never boring, but still profound, but assimilated inside more.
Mm-hmm.
First, when you see it, it just takes a little while to kind of get over the shock of it. And naturally, you're going to want to see, you're going to chase it a little bit, are you? You're going to, I want that back. I want it back now.
Yes, but the mind wants to understand it.
And that's okay. That's what mind does, right? It's going to try to think about it from every angle. It's like somebody's just handed mind a Rubik's Cube and said, there, solve it, Mind's going, oh, yeah, I can get into this, and do all of that. And it'll think about it and it'll have epiphanies and it'll do its thing and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with mind, is there? It's just to recognize I have the epiphany and then mind takes it and tries to understand it.
Okay. Can I ask you one more thing? 2 days ago, I woke up with the most excruciating pain in my lower back. And at first I was in resistance. And then I thought, well, what are the blocks? What are my thoughts creating this? And then I went into, okay, you can stay here. I welcome you. It's just a movement in the stillness. And then today I was feeling my back and there's no pain. And I went, exactly. So it's got to be just some stuck energy.
Yeah.
Because I didn't do anything to cause it. I didn't, I've been quite quiet recently. I thought I need to exercise more. But it's actually, the pain is so painful. Yet there is no pain there. Like I can't touch it. So is that just like stuck energy that is moving through, that I should just allow it to be there?
Yeah, as we see clearer, and even before we see clearer sometimes, the closer we get to truth, the more life force is going to try to flow through the body, because we've been running on empty. All these thoughts we've been believing have cost us all this energy. And as we start to move away from them, then of course the big one is that I'm a separate being. And then the other big one is that all of this form is really form. And that costs us so much energy that as we start to see that that's not really true, there's an influx of life force energy to the body, which flows through the body, and where it hits the resistance. So the body is a physical representation of our mind. And it'll have resistance in certain in certain areas based on what thoughts we've been believing. And you can feel the life force hit up against some resistance, like a big boulder standing in a fast flowing river, or, you know, some kind of big rock. And this powerful energy is just kind of smashing up against it. That's why we have this pain. But the moment that you don't resist that, or the moment that you don't resist the fact you're resisting it, nobody's going to like physical pain. Everybody would like it to stop. And if you can just totally accept that, you're not in resistance to it, you're not pushing against the pushing against, then the block, the resistance dissolves, and it's gone. You could say that pain is the same as resistance in a way, but pain is the one thing that we all resist, of course. And then when we get on a spiritual pathway, we resist it, and we also say we shouldn't be resisting it, which makes the whole thing worse. So every time we have a seeing, there's going to be a new influx of life force energy that comes with that. And there might be an adjustment period, not necessarily physical pain, but where your body is getting used to this new level of energy. And you've felt that already, right? Obviously, at other times as well in that. But can you accept the pains there? But can you also accept, you know, as you did, but can you also accept I'm never going to like it? There's no place inside me when I'm going to go, woohoo, I'm in a lot of pain, you know, which mind somehow has this idea that you can somehow get there, right? And it's just not possible. So
just accept it as a neutral event. Is that what?
Yeah, and you can also do what we did tonight. What is pain actually? Isn't it also nerve impulses? Isn't it also made up of all my memories and ideas about pain, about how long it's going to last, how bad it's going to be? Isn't it also made up of the muscles that the pain is running through? You know, as you really sort of start to take it apart, what it actually is, because pain is one of those absolute labels that we absolutely believe in, physical pain. It's a very quick teacher, isn't it? Quite a harsh teacher. And it's the one label that we give an absoluteness to, like body. You know, this is a body and it's feeling pain. Those two assumptions cost us a lot of energy in that. Of course, I'm not saying to ignore the pain, you know, do what you need to do to help the body, of course. And if it needs to be checked out medically, you know, all of that is fine. But none of that will help or work without this, you know, permanently, at least without this seeing underneath.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's just energy, moving through energy, you know.
Well, isn't it similar to the breath that I experienced, that this pain is just moving through the system?
Can there be pain without breath?
No.
Strange question. Yeah. And as you begin to look like this, you begin to see pain and the breath are the same thing, and the body and the muscles and all of that. Of course, mind is never going to get this. It'll say, well, you've sat in that chair for too long. You should have got up and done some yoga, or, and maybe that's true, right, as well. But just seeing it at this level too. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to ask anything, or I've got time for one more. Zoe, when you're ready.
Okay, I'm trying to find my stuff on the iPad.
There we go. Lovely.
Okay, hi. So I just wanted to share. I was walking along earlier, listening to one of your satsangs, and you were, answering some questions somebody had, or this person had started talking about their story, and it was like. All of a sudden, it was like, who is this person talking about? It was like this weird, clear seeing of, what we do. We talk about these memories as if they're true, as if they're real. It's like snap into place. Yeah, and it was like, wow. And I had heard this before, but it just was experientially clear today that the memories of the past are just a complete fabrication. It's like there's nothing there. That's not that person. They're just, it's like this ghost form coming up.
It's like
And
thoughts are telling a story about thoughts and believing
yes,
that it's true. Yeah.
and then the other thing I wanted to share, I was in a thrift shop, and it's run by some sort of Christian organization. And I remember in the past, and I just feel a huge connection to Jesus. So I'm not putting that down, but just the ultra sort of the Bible Belt Christianity. I hope I'm not offending anybody, but in the past I couldn't listen to that music. It was like, just, and they were playing this devotional music, and it was incredibly beautiful. It was like the meaning just poured out, just love for God, love for Jesus, love for the truth of our being. I was like, wow. Thank you, Helen.
I remember the first time I ended up in a church after I kind of seen the truth, and it had gone really deep, and I'd had so many ideas about religion all my life, and ironically, amusingly, spent some time as an atheist, and then I found myself in this church through an event that I was going to as part of this event, and it was just this stunningly eminent presence, there's this rich devotional presence that was just so obviously what Christ really is, and to actually feel that without the thoughts about it all. I just spent the whole time sobbing, that, and everyone's looking at me going like, what's up with her? And it was just such a moment for me to realize I didn't really understand anything about Christ, and I was actually experiencing him in that moment rather than all the things I thought about what was said in the Bible, rather than, actually just getting out of my own head and experiencing it. And it was so lovely to kind of be at peace with that, because we've all got ideas about it, haven't we?
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's your teachings and the Sangha support and just the constant deepening, like even listening to you today, it's like, how could she possibly give us more? And you just gave us more. So thank you. So beautiful.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Lovely. Okay, so we will leave it there for today. Thank you for bringing your presence to this satsang, the presence, your presence, same thing, and for intelligent questions and commitment to your own awakening. Thank you. Namaste.